Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Friday, the 24th of May here in London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, City of London execs tell Bloomberg they want certainty from the general election result, with many open to a Labour government.
G7 finance ministers and central bankers meet in Italy as their economies take different growth paths.
Plus, weighing up a starring role in the AI boom, Alphabet and Meta offer multi-million-dollar deals to partner with Hollywood.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
Financial industry executives in the City of London say they're looking for clarity from the general election, with many open to a Labour government. In past votes, the incumbent Conservative Party has argued Labour couldn't be trusted with the economy, but a range of business leaders have told Bloomberg the opposition party has shown it's willing to listen to UK PLC. Lloyds of London CEO John Neal told Bloomberg Radio earlier this year Britain needs stability no matter who wins.
I think we all need the confidence of a two-term government, whatever that government is, because we just need the sense that there is a plan, and that plan is going to have to stretch beyond one term of government. So I would say we need change, and I'm not saying that has to be a Labour government versus a Conservative government. We do need to change. We cannot carry on the way we are.
You can listen to the full interview with John Neal online by searching for Daybreak Europe's Bullish Britain podcast. Bloomberg has learned that the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt and his Labour counterpart Rachel Reeves may go head-to-head in a televised debate on the economy ahead of polling day.
G7 finance ministers are meeting in Italy today as officials confront the prospect of increasing monetary policy divergence, while cooling price pressure and lacklustre growth are likely to drive rate cuts in the Eurozone and the UK. In the US, a durable economy and sticky inflation are leading to a wait-and-see approach from the Fed. Italian Minister Giancarlo Giorgetti, who is hosting the G7 meeting, says that growing turmoil around the world is also front of mind for those attending.
The geopolitical tension increases every day, not only in Ukraine, but in several parts of the world. That means that here are G7 countries and Western democracies. That means that we have to decide together how we could share a common value, a common, perhaps, answer to these challenges.
Giancarlo Giorgetti speaking there as the G7 also converges on a US plan to squeeze value out of frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. The move would secure as much as $50 billion in critical financing for Ukraine and help shield it from political shifts on both sides of the Atlantic.
Segantii is shutting down and suspending redemptions in an abrupt end for one of Asia's largest hedge funds. Sources told Bloomberg redemptions requests had hit $1 billion after an insider trading scandal spooked investors. Bloomberg's Manuel Baguri says the unwinding of the firm's $5 billion assets under management is causing a stir in Asia.
I can tell you that the community, is talking non-stop about this topic here in Hong Kong and the impact it may have on other firms as well. It highlights the severe impact in confidence, right? When these insider trading scandals hit a firm like Segantii, definitely has a big impact.
Baguri adds that the firm says it could liquidate 84% of its portfolio within a day and 97% within 5 days. Bloomberg has learned Segantii's illiquid holdings have included e-startups Klarna, Ola, Bundle and Enable.
Sources tell Bloomberg Elon Musk's SpaceX has initiated discussions about selling existing shares at a price that could value the closely held company at roughly $200 billion. The story from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Sources tell Bloomberg SpaceX is discussing a tender offer that may kick off in June. The price for the offer has not been decided, but sources say SpaceX is weighing offering shares at $108 to $110 apiece. A $200 billion valuation would be a premium to the $180 billion valuation the company obtained through its most recent tender offer. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Citigroup, Barclays and HSBC are ramping up demands for staff to return to the office 5 days a week. The order comes as shifting regulation from the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority forces Wall Street firms to reinstate pre-pandemic rules for monitoring workplaces. HSBC's US CEO Michael Roberts says he doesn't want to force employees back to working in person.
We'll make sure that whoever needs to be here 5 days a week will be here 5 days a week. But I don't want to decree people coming back. I want them to come back because they want to come back. And they do so, and they're productive, they feel good about it, and that's essentially the environment we have built today.
HSBC's Michael Roberts there speaking to Bloomberg. While some lenders are blaming new rules for the changes, others, including Barclays, cite the benefits of office working, such as collaboration and culture. It may spell the end of remote working for many deal makers, but regulators say they're trying to encourage greater flexibility, not less.
Alphabet and Meta are offering Hollywood studios millions of dollars to partner with them on AI video generation software. Both companies are developing technology that can create realistic scenes from a text prompt. OpenAI is also having similar conversations with studios. Last month, the Chief Operating Officer, Brad Lightcap, said that OpenAI will work towards building media partnerships.
We have a long way to go, I think, to build those tools still and start to work with the industry to get there. But we are committed to doing that work. And that's really where I think the foundation of our partnership efforts come from. And then also being able to just bring what is source of truth information into the ChatGPT experience for people.
That was OpenAI's Brad Lightcap speaking there. Hollywood studios are keen to discuss ways to use AI to reduce costs, whilst also protecting themselves from having their work stolen. Now, in a moment, we are going to be talking about the G7 gathering in Italy, very beautiful part of Italy in a moment, talking about the most serious issues affecting those countries. Also, we are into electioneering and the election campaign here in the UK, so we'll talk about that too. But first, this story caught my eye. So New Zealand used to be...
This feels a bit like you've been searching for a property online and you found
well,
this.
It's Friday, why not? Look, I know that New Zealand is a very long way from the UK, but it has been enormously popular with the super rich, especially Americans, and especially doomsday preppers. Not so many of those perhaps here in the UK, but certainly plenty of them in the US. And a lot have been looking to New Zealand as one of these wonderful places where you might be able to have that kind of
sort
experience.
Of splendid isolation really is the thing that's being offered. But of course, New Zealand changed the rules in 2018, which doesn't allow people who aren't citizens or tax residents of the country to buy property there. There's a debate underway, though, in the current government, because that was under the previous government these rules are put in place, about whether or not to change those rules. And our colleague Ainsley Thompson has been writing about a quite honestly fantastic house that's for sale.
Gorgeous, yes.
There's great photos as well worth looking. One of these beautiful isolated ranch type properties that you could buy, but it's actually, this is having a huge effect on the market, that these buyers are barred from getting into the market if you're, as I say, not a citizen or a tax resident. So it'll be very interesting to see if the current government would consider in the budget. We weren't able to get an answer out of the politicians in New Zealand that we spoke to. They pointed to the next budget as being a potential source of somewhere that an announcement might be made. But an interesting one to watch, and perhaps if you are a super rich person looking for an isolated ranch, maybe that's where you're looking.
Well, I mean, it's close to vineyards and golfing and skiing. I mean, it's Friday. It sounded fantastic. Yes, next week, though, New Zealand will have its budget, and so perhaps we will get an answer on that point.
Let's turn back to matters more concretely here in the UK. Latest consumer confidence figures improving for a second consecutive month. Welcome news, no doubt, for the Prime Minister, who called that general election this week for the 4th of July, a campaign expected to be fought in large part on living standards and the economy. Our UK correspondent Lizzie Burden is with us for more, and of course across all of the developments in the election campaign. Lizzie, we've been reporting today about how the city has been thinking about this election campaign. What have we been hearing about the mood among executives, and so what sort of impact might that have on the campaign?
Good vibes, as they have been really for the past couple of years building up to this election. Caroline and I have been to party conference, and we've seen firsthand the enthusiasm among business leaders for a change of government. You have to wonder whether that's actually because the polls suggest Labour are going to be the next government, and so they want to cosy up and have influence. But really, we're looking forward forward to these manifestos to see what the detail will be, because so far it's been rolling out the red carpet for business, promises of stability and growth, respect for Rachel Reeves and her BOE, Bank of England credentials. Can they translate that into serious policy when, as you say, both parties are extremely fiscally constrained? One of the key measures of success on this front post-election will be, can they bring listings back to London? If you look at the stats at the moment, just 2% of the $12 billion raised for IPOs in Europe this year went to the London Stock Exchange. Yes, we've had some big names recently announcing plans to list in London, like Shein and Raspberry Pi, but the situation since Brexit has been pretty dire. More and more companies listing elsewhere. So you can expect to hear throughout the next 6 weeks both parties' plans for how they're going to encourage more companies to bring their business and keep their business in the UK.
Although wisely, surely the Labour Party have been reluctant and to make big promises on that front. It was a very difficult thing for a government to turn around, private business listing in the UK. But look, the election campaign is fully underway. What comes next?
Well, we're going to see Parliament in place today, the Commons and the Lords, but then formally dissolved on Thursday. So until then, very little legislation is likely to be passed, except anything that passes by consensus. Then you have every Commons seat vacant, so there'll be no more MPs, just ministers. They can make decisions in the national interest, but they have to do it in consultation with Keir Starmer. Then you've got to have candidates delivering their nomination papers by June the 7th, and there might be quite a scramble because, of course, this is a snap election. And then, most excitingly for us, we'll get the manifesto pledges leaking out. And then if you look at history, it's about 18 to 29 days before the election that they're usually fully published. But on the detail of the economics, I'm really looking forward to hopefully getting a television debate between the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, and his Labour counterpart, Rachel Reeves.
OK, and give us a little snapshot, I suppose, of what we're expecting from the campaigning today.
Well, the opposition Labour leader Keir Starmer is heading up to Scotland. As we've been covering on the Bloomberg UK Politics podcast, an absolutely key battleground for Labour, really trying to capitalise on the disarray in the Scottish National Party. But remember, Labour used to dominate north of the border, so it's not an impossibility that they could do that again. In 2010, they had 41 of the 59 seats in Westminster in Scotland, but that kind of collapsed with support for independence. Can they get it back now? So Keir Starmer today is going to be focusing on energy policy and their proposal within Labour for a publicly owned clean power company called Great British Energy. Can he inspire votes north of the border?
OK, really interesting. Thank you so much to you, Lizzie Burden, for being with us, our UK correspondent.
Turning next to the finance ministers and central bank governors from the group of 7 nations who are gathering in Stresa in Italy. US Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen will be there as more aid for Ukraine will be one key issue on the agenda. This meeting happening before the G7 Leaders Summit in June, which Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky is expected to attend. Let's go live to Stresa in Italy and join our correspondent Oliver Crook, who's there. Oliver, good morning. Ukraine's finance minister is going to be at this gathering. Frozen Russian assets and their proceeds, a key issue up for discussion.
Yeah, I think, Stephen, this is going to be kind of the main project here for the finance ministers, is to try to get an architecture that everybody is happy with, that then the leaders can sign off on 3 weeks, that will somehow monetize the Russian assets that are being held by central banks across the world in a meaningful way, not just in the sort of the profits that are generated every year to the tune of about $3 billion. What they're trying to do is write a big check, about $50 billion, and basically amortize that and kind of link that to the future earnings of those Russian assets. However, it is a little bit more complicated, as ever with these things. The devil is in the details. There are a lot of questions about, let's say the war ends in 5 years. You've committed 15 years of future profits. Who then is going to pay to fill that gap? And those are the kinds of questions that the finance ministers need to answer here. And really, there's a couple other things that why this is extremely important for the G7. They need to continue to demonstrate unity. Janet Yellen said it yesterday. Putin is counting on everybody's sort of fatigue on this to stand by Ukraine. But also, let's not forget, we're a few months away from a U.S. presidential election. For the Europeans and for the G7 that are currently in power, this is a way of Trump-proofing financing for the Ukraine defense into the future.
Okay. Well, speaking of Janet Yellen, she will be laying out her priorities for the G7 later. How much do you think she's going to also say about the trade threat from China?
Yeah, so what's really interesting about this, Caroline, is that it's not really in the communique in terms of the items that are technically on the agenda. China is not mentioned by name. However, Janet Yellen has made it extremely clear that this is one of her priorities. And again, it is partially to try to demonstrate unity among the G7 in terms of the language about China. This conversation about overcapacity, whether the Chinese are over manufacturing and dumping it onto global economies, is something that Janet Yellen wants to really get buy-in from the Europeans and the other G7. And really the elephant in the room, I think, for these ministers and for central bankers alone is, are we actually kind of slowly walking towards a possible trade war, right? We've got the Biden tariffs coming in. We expect the EV tariffs from Europe to kick in a couple of weeks' time. The Chinese have threatened to retaliate. Where does that leave trade going forward at a time when the sort of global economy and growth is in question? And what critically will it mean for inflation? So that's what we're going to ask some of the central bankers and finance ministers as we speak to them over the next couple of days.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.